Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to the July Organic Open House, co-hosted by NOFA New Jersey and North Slope Farm. And what I'd like to do is just share my screen to take you to the NOFA New Jersey website as a starting place. Okay, so say you're interested in becoming a journey person, or you're interested in being a mentor farmer for journey persons. If you go to the NOFA New Jersey website, which is simply nofanewjersey.org, then right under the education menu item, we've got the Journey Person program. And so the 2020 Journey Persons were posted in this setting and provided with links to their social media. We sort of felt like the best way for us as an organization to promote our farmers in New Jersey was to create an easy place for the public to link directly to what those farmers are doing. So tonight we're lucky enough to have Jared with us from Closter Farm and Livestock Company. And we also have Johan and Lindsay from Fields Without Fences. They were journey persons many years ago. So we'll get a chance to hear from them, but I just want to tell you a little bit about the resources that we have. So this is one place to find past journey persons, and hopefully each year as we go forward, we'll be updating this page, so you'll be able to find everybody here, and you'll find links to their social media and what they're posting. So North Slope Farm has provided NOFA New Jersey a sort of a home base and headquarters. We were at the Duke Estates in Hillsborough, and now we're moving our office to North Slope Farm. And in addition, that will provide us with gardens and fields to offer for classes and educational opportunities. So to learn, to connect there, if you go to nofanewjersey.org, you can also go to northslopefarm.com and find your link to NOFA New Jersey. We're also going to be, listing the topics that we're discussing. So if you go to the link for the July open house, we'll just give you a little introduction to the topic tonight. So traditionally, if you wanted to learn about how to farm organically, you would find a farmer who offered an internship or an apprenticeship and hope for the best. NOFA New Jersey long ago realized that individual farmers could only provide a limited experience for their apprentices, and we worried that one farm might offer great learning and another farm not so great. So one way to address that was twilight meetings were established, so apprentices could visit multiple farms during the season, and two very important things occurred. One was that new farmers saw that many farmers approach problems in many different ways. No single answer is true for everyone, i.e., don't be afraid to be unique or to think outside the box. It might work for you. Another thing is that farmers in training and farmers themselves got to see that everyone's farm has problems and limitations. Visiting another farm during the season, you see the broken tools, the weedy beds, the harried washing station, and you realize my farm is not a failure. Struggling with loss and hardship is part of the process. Other farmers are also struggling with these things, and somehow that's often a relief. NOFA New Jersey is focused on education, and so we put our effort into an annual winter conference that changes year to year, and we focus on annual programs and events like tonight. Additionally, NOFA New Jersey invested in developing a Journey Person program designed to identify new farming operations that could use the support and encouragement of a dedicated farmer mentor. So the farmer mentor is a farmer or a retired farmer who will actively meet with, ask questions of, seek resources for, and follow up with the Journey Person farmer. NOFA New Jersey welcomes folks who would like to be recognized, who would like to be a recognized Journey Person farmer, and we will connect you with a farmer mentor, as we have done for years. It is our hope that NOFA New Jersey can also promote the Journey Persons, as we do by linking this Journey Person's social media on our Journey Person webpage. There have been many Journey Persons over the years. Below is just a sampling of some that have been through the program, but aren't yet listed at nofanewjersey.org. Fields Without Fences are going to be represented tonight by Johan and Lindsay, who are joining us. And there's a couple other farms listed there that I encourage you to check out and see what they're up to. I think what we'll do is just jump to Jared's Instagram, because I love the fact that Jared posts a lot of stuff, so you get to see what's going on. And Jared, maybe I will just take this opportunity to put you on the spot to tell us a little bit about what we're looking at. If you want me to scroll down to anything in particular. In particular, one of the things that I really liked is this one, because it kind of feeds into this the topic of controlling pests, for instance, groundhogs. Have you been having trouble with groundhogs in the garden this year?
No, but it's just something to talk about. It's a marketing angle.
So it's an adorable pup. This pup is new this year, right?
Yeah, she was a depression, millennial COVID pup. Pretty standard for the course, along with my avocado toast. That's local New Jersey avocados, right?
All right. Where are you getting those from?
Down the road, there's this great store called Farmhouse Gourmet. They just opened up, and they sell local, organic, fresh New Jersey avocados. And people come to me all week and ask why I don't have them. No, I mean, I think you're trying to lead me down a path of like what kind of issues I'm facing. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's always fun talking to you because you always have lots of different things on your mind. I think what I'd like to do is to just share with anybody who's watching this, that you joined as a Journey Person, coming actually into it with a fair amount of experience, farming in other operations. And I think so I guess maybe what I'll do is ask you to think a little bit about when you joined the Journey Person program, if you could kind of remember what you were hoping for, and talk a little bit about why you would join a Journey Person program, and then take it into where you're at now. So we assume you've benefited from some mentoring, but we don't need to focus on that specifically as much as just to hear kind of what's going on the farm these days.
Okay. So what I hoped to get out of the Journey Person program was a expansion of my network in the area. I had lived in Central Jersey prior to this, and moving to Bergen County, where there are, I think, all of 8 farms, only 3 of which are actually farms. And I say that under the definition that a farm is a business operation that seeks profit while simultaneously feeding people with products grown on site. Farm assessment allows nurseries and like resellers who are grandfathered in to be called farms or call themselves farms. And we face a lot of that in Bergen County. So I was facing kind of a desolate and barren landscape of not really having a robust community of other, what I would call real farmers around. So my goal for the Journey Person program was to broaden my network mostly. There was no specific piece of information. And I think at a certain level of farming, you're not looking for any particular piece of information generally, you know, and to face a particular problem, whether that's like, you know, my BT usage rate is too low, or, you know, what should I use to combat this issue, or how is this crop rotation working for you, or whatever. You know, those are good specific pieces of information you might seek out at a given time. But generally what I looked for, again, was a community, a broadening of my community, and to have a sounding board and a place to help grow and grow with. And then I think your second question was, what did I get out of the Journey Person program?
Well, not even so much that. You know, because I think that's such a personal thing, and it's a function of, you know, it's sort of hard to nail down. Maybe I think more to the point, I think at this point would be to hear a little bit about, maybe if you could describe your operation, because it's a pretty unique, you've got a pretty unique operation. You're working on a fairly small scale, but high productivity and diversity of crops. So
I think we're unique in the context of agriculture at large, and maybe agriculture where NOFA usually touches base, which is mostly, I would say, like tractor farming and some larger scale operations focusing on a smaller array or a fewer battery of crops. We take a lot of hints from Jean-Martin Fortier, Connor Crickmore, some like what people have kind of dubbed like the quintessential YouTube farmers, who base their whole operation around small budget, small scale, but incredibly high productivity farming. And we do that on 7.2 acres, 6.5 of which we leverage for the farm. And only of that 6.5, you know, we're like on and off some of it as we range the chickens around, but you know, we only have 6,000 feet of covered space. Everything else is outdoors, and we've done 1,400 broilers so far.
Wow.
I have another 600 to go for this year. We do events, classes, parties, and then we have 3 market days a week on farm, where people come and do like a market card style CSA on top of being open to the general public. And then we do maybe about 20-ish, depending on the week, % of our sales to wholesale caterers, restaurants. We sell to some relatively prestigious names in the city as well, which we're starting to get into and figure out more and more. And we're only in our second year. We're only 18 months old. So we're still figuring a ton out, like what's our best product market fit, you know, how many of each type of pepper and eggplant and potato and carrot to have at a given time, what's storing well, what does our storage do really well, what's our team, you know, really suited for, what's really hitting us hard pest-wise at what time of the year, and all these, you know, all these questions you just start to face in your second year while you're trying to find that sweet spot.
yeah, you've really blown me away with how you really landed and just got on your feet so quickly. One of the things that keeps coming up for me as a subject matter is the difficulty a lot of farms have when they're getting started with having bounteous growth, like just getting the soil up to speed so that when they plant a crop, they get a harvest from it. And I was really impressed with what you did to your soil to get, it seems like you've had really good success with that. Would you say that that's the case, that you feel comfortable with your soil fertility and productivity?
No, I never feel comfortable with it. I never feel comfortable about anything we do. I think that's the only thing I feel comfortable saying about what we do, is that I don't feel comfortable about anything we do. Part of what I think has allowed us to get to where we are is my partner on this and I are just constantly seeking improvement and innovation and ways to do things better. And at a certain point, you stop being able to take cues or like large cues from other farms, and you kind of just have to pave your own way and, figure out what's going to work best for you in your context. And there's only so much research you can do because what we're doing is not in a vacuum, and there's so many outside forces. So to answer your question, I'm really happy with the money we spent up front to boost our soil fertility, and I want to not stop. I don't think there is a point at which you can stop boosting your soil fertility, especially if you're going to be extracting it into a bounty of crops at the rate we do every year. So figuring out how to leverage management intensive grazing into our system, letting sections of the farm lie fallow, cover crop, graze, mix that into our crop rotation, maybe figure out a way to profit off of that fallow year in some way from that space just beyond chickens are just all interesting ways to think about it, and trying to find that sweet spot of how much space we need to have at a given time under production, and then how much we can have out of production, kind of boosting to that next tier of fertility. Like we took a section of the farm in our first year, in the first 6 months, actually, from 0.26 organic matter up to over 8. And that was great, but I compete with farms who have a native organic matter of like 25 to 30 because they're in the black dirt region of New York, which is where there was a massive glacial melt millennia ago. And they have to compete with an amount of weeds I couldn't fathom, but they also get like native soil that doesn't need a single amendment or compost. So those are some of my direct competitors, and to beat them out at market in terms of a competitive angle, I need to continually boost my organic matter, not to mention how beneficial it is for the environment, our community, our ecology in the soil has just boomed, and that's amazing to see. And I don't see that going down if we continue to improve our organic matter. So.
Cool. So what were some of the things that you did? So you're talking about cover cropping, you're talking about fallowing, you're talking about grazing on the land. When you first got the garden started, can you kind of just go through some of the steps of how you amended the soil?
Yeah. So step one was test. We did that through Rutgers, and I don't speak very highly of their testing program. I would probably go with a private lab, Logan Labs, or someone else in the future. I just don't think they stand up for the money to some of the other options, and some of their recommendations were just way off base for what we were trying to do. And I say that in the context of, when you're choosing what to do to boost your soil initially, this is a massive upfront cost decision and something that will hopefully benefit you for decades and get you on the right path. And if you make the wrong decision, like bringing in a contaminated compost, like Stonehouse Market Garden has done in Kentucky, it can be catastrophic and career ending to a farm. So really taking your time and not moving too fast was really, really important. So I can't stress enough how much, we started talking about what to do in September and we didn't do anything until March. And that's not only, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the winter of 2019 into 2020 was incredibly warm. You could go outside in a flannel in February and be very comfortable. So we had the opportunity to break ground very early and chose not to for a multitude of reasons. And during that time, it was just a lot of, pressure testing, a lot of ideas, making sure the numbers really worked on what we were trying to do. And then when we did go, we put a lot of infrastructure in the ground immediately. So we dug 3-foot deep trenches all through the farm and buried 2-inch HDP pipe for frost-free irrigation and wired it all to a Wi-Fi enabled programmable irrigation system, which drastically reduced the amount of time, energy, and headache we would have had in our first few years irrigating. We put that soil back and then we planned out where we wanted things to go tentatively. Once that was there, we talked to the DEP and got the okay to shut off our well into a man-made pond that was on the property. We dredged the pond, mixed the pond with about 250 yards of compost, and then spread that everywhere we were going to grow. And we also moved a road that bisected the property in two. It was all blacktop, and removed about half of I think it was about 110 feet by 40-foot blacktop pad, and reduced it down to about a 45-foot by 45-foot blacktop pad. Created a whole nother area to grow, and moved the road to the edge of the property where the growing space and growing potential wasn't as good. And, it sounds weird, but we benefited a ton from the onset of COVID at the beginning of our project, because we found ourselves flush with available contractors. And now you can't find a single contractor to replace your anything. And back then we had 6 contractors sitting on their hands who couldn't work anywhere, but we were defined as essential and they needed to work. So we were able to bring forward a number of years of work. And then, we got all of that done in about 2 months. So irrigation was set forever. Year-round 365 irrigation was done. Organic matter had been initially boosted, and then we set on just, picking rocks and opening up beds and starting to grow some stuff, which started really, really late. That was about, I think I finally got something in the ground in like late March. And this year I got our first seeds in February in our tunnels. And this winter, we're not going to stop growing. We'll just keep growing all winter long.
That's awesome. Jared Krawitz, Closter Farm Livestock Company. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Jared. I appreciate you joining us, and always appreciate your input. You're such a great resource. I'd really like to bring you in to have you tell us about some of your different systems specifically, not least of which I keep talking to you about wanting to get your salad greens washing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, I stole that from, what's his name? He's out in Ohio now. It's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. Most of my ingenious ideas are just stolen ideas that I've improved like 1%. And most of those ideas are still like most of Elliot Coleman's ideas were he just stole from French farmers when he was over there. And then everyone else just stole from him. And then the MacArthur's in New York and on and on and on. So I wouldn't say that anything I am doing is my idea. It's just a hopefully 1% better than the person I stole it from.
Well, I mean, it's like it comes down to having the idea and then putting it into practice. And that's really what we're getting at here is it's like the transition from the bright idea to implementing it, and then not only implementing it, but adjusting, getting the, connected to other people who have similar visions, maybe competitive visions. So I appreciate you continuing to contribute as you do. And thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Jared before I want to jump over to Johan and Lindsay? All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up your guys' website. And Johan and Lindsay, if you guys could maybe share a little bit about your story. It's been, when did you guys start Fields Without Fences? I know it's kind of, maybe there's not a hard start date. you might have morphed into it over a couple years. But if you want to tell, maybe tell us a little bit about how you got started with your farming. Maybe if you could relate to us a little bit your relationship with the Journey Person program. And then if you want to just wrap up by telling us a little bit about what you're up to these days, and feel free to direct me to any pages that you'd like to have brought up.
Sure. So I guess you could pinpoint our start date as 2012, although it wasn't really a growing season. The story leading up to it involved we had some access to 10 acres in Kingwood, New Jersey, just south of Frenchtown. Johan's mother had bought the property, and the house was pretty dilapidated and run down. And Johan said to me, we were both kind of at a transitional moment, and he said, what do you think about moving out to that house and fixing it up for like a couple months? And I said, oh, sure, sounds like fun. Of course, the renovation, we went for 2 winters without heat. The renovation took much longer than we initially thought it would. And in the process, we started interfacing with the landscape. So a bit about where we are geographically. We're on the edge of the Delaware River watershed, about a mile from the Delaware River. It's a really critical area in that all of the water, when we say, edge of the Delaware River watershed, what that means is all of the water that's making its way down into the Delaware pass through these cliffs. And so there are tons of streams and tributaries and creeks that run through here. This is fairly historically farmed land. So the first forest clearings happened back in the 1700s with colonial settlement. And we also know that indigenous populations were living and growing in these cliff sides as far back as at least 10,000 years, what there's, archaeological evidence of. So it's had an interesting trajectory of human habitation. And I mention all of this because the way that the landscape is managed has a lot to do with eventuality of where we found it. So while it's historically farmed land, by the time that we started interacting with the landscape around 2011, It was basically waterlogged, compacted clay subsoil with 0 inches of topsoil left. So Johan comes from an annual vegetable background, and up until that point, he had been running a 10-acre vegetable CSA. So we sort of thought that that would be a model that we would apply in the landscape. And it became very quickly apparent that that wasn't possible. It wasn't really even possible to bring machinery out into the landscape because we had no percolation, and started asking questions about how do you go from what we were reading on the maps, which were saying this is silt loam soil, to 0 inches of topsoil over the course of 200 years. So that inquiry led us down a path to look at the functionality of where our geography is set, to understand the critical role that the water moving through these cliff sides and also the indigenous woodlands that were here function. So we started thinking about how we could experiment with the landscape to bring it back to a state of, if not restoration, then regeneration in the form of restoring a multi-strata woodland, while also engaging in agricultural production. And so we started looking at really everything: ecological restoration, forest gardening, permaculture. This was back in 2011. And I will give Mike credit because he did have a permaculture book on his shelf when we toured his farm back then. But for the most part, we were a bit, sort of outliers in that regard, and in trying to find examples of models of what we can now, I think more easily refer to as multi-strat agroforestry, which people are more familiar with at this point. And that basically means utilizing different layers for production. So harvesting from the herbaceous layer, harvesting from a shrub layer, and then harvesting from an overstory tree layer. So it was fairly experimental, both in what we were trying to do, existing models that were out there. I'll tie in a little bit about the Journey program into this as well, if that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to reiterate that the sort of the process that you've just described, where you were like starting from a point of being like, hey, let's renovate a house and get a farm started, to what you've just described, which is to say, a real sort of personal journey of recognizing that that wasn't going to be that easy, and maybe wasn't really what you should be focused on, and creating kind of your own path. So tell us a little bit about, did the Journey person process help in any way in that process, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It was interesting because at that moment, like I said, we were reaching out, in many different directions, for inspiration, for guidance. And I do remember reaching out to Justine, who was working at NOFA at the time. And right. I said, do you have anything going on in terms of like a program or resources that we could get some access to? And like I said, Johan had been running a 10-acre vegetable CSA, so we had experience in that regard. But what we were trying to do, working with perennial crops, working with successional reforestation and multi-strat agroforestry, there weren't really a whole lot of people, at least vocally, doing that at the time that we were aware of. So she mentioned the Journey Person program, and what I'll say about it that was really helpful at the time. So we joined as NOFA's first Journey Persons, NOFA New Jersey's first Journey Persons. And so at first we were all kind of feeling our way through it. And so I think word on the street was we had really wet soil. So we were connected with a farmer who also had, really wet soil. And so that was an interesting phase because it kind of, we started to share experiences about, what are some possible crops. And then more than anything, Mark Canwright at the time from Comeback Farm was who we were working with. He really was very forthright and endearing about his personal journey and his experience, and kind of opened up that window to this can be a very trying process to go through. And we were certainly feeling that at the time. And then we also got linked up with Solebury Orchards because we were interested in growing fruit and nut crops. And so Solebury Orchards is an apple orchard, but it was akin, proxy to what we were interested in doing. So we started working with Brian over there a little bit in terms of getting his feedback, and he really plugged us into the nature of perennial agriculture. In that I remember asking him, he had started his operation when he was 25, and I remember saying to him at the time, so like, when did you feel really good about things? When did you feel like you had really settled into a groove? And he didn't even blink an eye. He just looked at me. He's like, probably around 40, I think. At this moment,
Yeah.
I'm just, you're kind of hoping that you, but that's sort of the nature of things. So we wound up doing a fair amount of work on the hydrology on our site in 2012, kind of just feeling it out on our own. Johan was doing work building a series of ponds across the landscape, trying to re-regulate some of the water flow. So whereas a lot of those streams and tributaries had become interrupted and almost taken on a pathological context in the landscape, moving the water would help to restore the natural flow across the landscape of water. And then we went a step further into creating a series of catchment ponds that would then collect that water, and then we'd recycle that water into irrigating the young seedlings that were going in. And we did start dry farming about 7 or 8 years ago. So we haven't irrigated since then, but now the ponds function more as creating microclimates and also helping restore the groundwater, as a groundwater charge across the landscape. So we, in our journey person interview in 2012, which there is a copy of somewhere on the internet because I found it once, I think at the time we were saying that we were doing native fruits, and that we had, in our transition to producing native fruits, hope to one day create an herbal CSA using harvests from medicinal herbs in the herbaceous layer. So I'm happy to report that we did start our first value-added products in 2013. We started New Jersey's first herbal CSA in 2015. That eventually grew into a 30 product line that we were selling retail, also doing some wholesale into local stores in the area, in New Jersey and a little bit in New York and Pennsylvania. And then things took a change. So having had this, element of success, and I'll say it's an element of success because there were a fair amount of, maybe self-perceived failures along the way. But we did start getting inquiries from our fellow farmers at first, just through word of mouth, that we had water issues on our site and had been able to remedy them. And so we started getting inquiries for consulting. So Johan started working with a lot of local farms in the area, and that just kind of continued to expand and expand regionally. And at a certain point, he sort of took over that leg of the business. And we also partner with Restoration Agricultural Development, which is Mark Shepard's organization, and do some work as far as the Midwest as well on agroecology consulting. And we expanded. So Johan's mom is up at the 10-acre site, which we're still farming, but we also have a 35-acre site. So I've been the primary farmer managing those two sites since about 2017. And we kind of realized, at this point, economies of scale, a lot of the diversity of markets and sales channels that we were working with before were really focusing on just streamlining and simplifying. So we're scaling up medicinal berry production. Elderberry has been our primary crop, so that will continue to be our primary crop. Moving most of our acreage into an elderberry shrub layer. That would be the 45 acres in total. An elderberry shrub layer with a canopy of fruit and nut trees. Less diverse, not less diversity, but less cultivation happening in the herbaceous layer. So we're not doing the bulk of our herbal products anymore. We're still continuing to do our elderberry syrup, and then scaling that up as well. And then also doing wild blueberry and aronia. So those are the top three flavonoid producing berries, and they're all native berries as well. So it ties in with the ecological restoration side of what we do. And we've also started doing more like organizational work on creating, not us personally, just kind of contributing to the conversation around the development of perennial production co-ops. And so how do we start to pool, how do we start to, Jared was mentioning earlier, I think before we were recording, the necessity for the farmer to take on all of these different roles in terms of being, a marketer and an accountant, and of course everything that goes into. We all know farmers are jack of all trades, and there's a lot of layers to it. So one of the ways that we can, I think, move forward to really leverage the potential of sustainable farms is to coalesce resource and production that we can pay the farmers a fair price for what they produce, but also give farmers access to markets. So that's also part of what we've kind of on the side been working on recently. Yeah, that was a lot. I don't know.
It's awesome though.
Okay.
It's great. It's a great story, and it's a pretty unique story. I mean, it's like you guys really took that agricultural inspiration and took it your own way, and have really managed to create some pretty amazing stuff. This picture here in the high tunnels. So you guys have high tunnels too?
Yeah, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's also mentioned by Jared earlier, but that's a NRCS cost share high tunnel that we put in for, the goal of season extension. And so for the first, I guess, 2-ish years, it was primarily winter grown annual production. And then at a certain point, we realized that this is going to be a big insight, but Mediterranean herbs used to a hot, dry microclimate do not grow well in cold, damp, wet soil. So we moved the bulk of our Mediterranean herb production into there for restaurant sales from both the season extension and then just having a better place to grow them. And then as time went on, we introduced that, multi-storied architecture in there as well. That's not as, commercially oriented, but the plant in the foreground on the left is a cold hardy citrus, and then there's figs in the background. So we're just playing around with plants that straddle that hardiness line.
Yeah, and that was also, it's interesting because there's the evolution of things, and so a lot of what we were growing in there was going to the herbal product line, even the citrus. So we were just having a conversation recently. I was like, is there a more appropriate use for that high tunnel right now? So, it's when you look at, everything is context specific when you're developing your own farm. And that context is tied to both your own personal circumstance and then also the conditions of the landscape and the positioning of the landscape. So there's this wonderful dance that happens between the two. And it's an iterative process because as you change, the landscape also changes, whether, hopefully it's in an improved context, hopefully with the right kind of stewardship. But it's hard to take an exact model and overlay it into a random context. You really need to familiarize yourself with the context of your landscape and your own personal context, what is available to you, and what you feel motivated by. And so we don't really get too shy about changing things up. So we were just having a conversation. I love that high tunnel. I was really happy with it. But now I'm thinking like, I don't know, is there something more appropriate that we should be doing in there now that we're not doing as many herbal products and whatnot? So it's leaving that space open for change to occur.
That's actually a really good segue to sort of maybe wrapping up the evening and making a pitch for the Journey Person program. Because my feeling about the mentoring, the strength of the farmer mentor is the ability to become friends, to learn about what the Journey Person is working on, and then to ask hard questions, to be able to kind of push the Journey Person a little bit to say, hey, so you've got this idea, how are you going to make that work? Okay, so that's what you're going to do. Do you have the tools to do that? Or do you have the resources? So it's really kind of the idea, the concept of the mentor is to provide a supportive, non-judgmental environment that will help the Journey Person sort of self-question and be self-aware, to anticipate issues and to move forward through them. I mean, so it's like some of the things that you shared was like your mentor, Mark Canwright, just being able to share with you just how, sometimes you face a lot of struggles and you just work through them. And then also maybe sharing a little bit about how meaningful it is, to work through them and to get to the other side. And then to have like the mentor of Brian Smith from Solebury Orchards talking about, taking 10, 15 years before you really feel comfortable. And my sense from knowing you guys a little bit that I do is that you guys really are on that journey of finding your place and finding a comfortable space. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, I think, I mean, if you're getting into farming to get rich, That's its own separate conversation. But I think many of us are attracted. Of course, we want to earn a livelihood, but there's also a deeper resonance that compels you to get out there and work in a very unstable market, a very unstable conditions, especially farming in this age of climate change right now, where every season is different and presents its own series of challenges. And so it requires a flexibility and I think a deeper resonance to continue to return to, something that's able to continually inspire you and have that gravitational pull.
Does anybody have any questions for Lindsay or Johan? So I think what I'd like to do is just make a pitch. Again, thank you, Lindsay and Johan, for your presentation, and thank you, Jared, for joining us and sharing as well. And if somebody hears these stories and they want to pursue it, they want to learn more about the Journey Person program, they want to learn more about NOFA New Jersey, I encourage you to go to the NOFANewJersey.org website and just, let's see, somewhere here there must be a way to contact us. Yes, there's email and phone number. So you can contact NOFA New Jersey, and to learn more about the program, I encourage you to do so. And just want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for listening. And unless I hear anybody have a question or something else they want to say, I think the thing to do is to wrap it up for the night and let everybody get back out there and enjoy the cooling evening. All right. Well, thank you guys again. And I look forward to seeing you out there in real time.
Yeah.
Good luck with the baby.
I know, any day now.
It really is any day. That's exciting.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This is great. Thanks.